Lenora pressed the home button and the screen went dark. She stood in the kitchen for a long moment, the phone face down on the counter, the coffee going cold beside it. Outside, the first snow of November was coming down in that quiet, indifferent way it does in Ottawa, steady and unhurried, as if the city had all the time in the world. She didn't. The post had been up for 6 hours before her sister sent her the screenshot with no caption. Just the image. That was enough. It was a photograph of a bedroom. Their bedroom. The cream duvet she'd ordered from a shop on Sparks Street, the brass lamp on Warren's side of the bed, the framed print above the headboard. A watercolor of the Gatineau Hills she'd bought at the Byward Market 3 summers ago. All of it there, in perfect, incriminating detail. And in the foreground, a woman Lenora had never met in person, holding the camera up to a mirror, wearing very little, looking very pleased with herself. The caption read, "Some places just feel like home," with a winking emoji. Lenora put her phone away and went to get her daughters from school. Lenora Marsh had met Warren Aldous at a fundraiser for the Ottawa Food Bank 11 years ago. She'd been 32, working as a policy analyst for the federal government, recently moved from Halifax and still learning the rhythms of this city. The bilingual signage, the way winter arrived, not as a season but as a statement. Warren had been charming in a low-key way, the kind of man who remembered what drink you ordered and actually listened when you talked. They were married 18 months later, in a small ceremony in the glebe, her mother crying in the front row, his brother giving a speech that went on too long. She had never once believed she was naive. She had a graduate degree, 20 years of professional experience, reading between the lines of government policy, and a mother who had raised her daughters to notice things. But betrayal doesn't arrive announced. It seeps in through the ordinary, through a changed phone password, through late evenings that had a different quality than they used to, through a husband who had started laughing at his phone in a way that had nothing to do with her. She had noticed. She had told herself she was imagining it. She had not been imagining it. Her daughters were 7 and 9. Maeve was the older one, serious and watchful, the kind of child who absorbed the mood of a room without being told to. Rosalie was younger, louder, entirely herself. The sort of child who skipped instead of walked and asked questions in sequences of 4 or 5 before pausing to breathe. Lenora picked them up from their school on Glebe Avenue, helped them with their boots in the entryway, listened to Rosalie describe an argument about whose turn it was on the monkey bars with the intensity of someone recounting a war. She made dinner. She helped with homework. She read to Rosalie until the small voice went quiet. Then she sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea she didn't drink, and she let herself think. The woman in the photograph was named Darcy Holcomb. Lenora had found that out within an hour of receiving the screenshot, not through any great detective work, but because Darcy Holcomb had a public Instagram account, a professional headshot for what appeared to be a digital marketing consultancy, and a habit of tagging her location in everything she posted. The bedroom photo had been tagged at a hotel whose name Lenora did not recognize. She cross-referenced it with the weekend. Warren had told her he was at a conference in Montreal. He had been in Toronto, at the Hazelton Hotel, with Darcy Holcomb. Lenora closed the laptop carefully, the way you close a door you don't want to slam. She thought about crying. She thought she probably would, eventually. But not tonight. Tonight she needed to think clearly, and grief would have to wait its turn. She didn't confront Warren that week, or the week after. This was not passivity. She was not a passive woman. It was strategy. She had watched enough situations dissolve into chaos to know that the person who acts from the sharpest emotion rarely ends up with the best outcome. She had seen it in her professional life 100 times. The colleague who sent the angry email, the minister who gave the unguarded press statement, the advisor who made the decision at the height of their outrage. They always regretted it. They always gave the other side something to use. She went to see her friend Kathleen Graves, who was a family lawyer with an office near the Rideau Center. She did not tell Kathleen everything. She told her enough. Kathleen, who had seen this particular shape of situation many times, and had long since stopped being surprised by any of it, asked practical questions and gave practical answers. She explained what Lenora should begin gathering, what she should document, what she should not touch yet. She said, at the end of the meeting, that Lenora was one of the calmest people she'd sat across from in a situation like this, and she meant it as a compliment, but her eyes carried something that looked like concern. "I'm not calm," Lenora said. "I'm organized." Kathleen nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. "That works too." The photograph stayed up on Darcy Holcomb's account for 4 days before someone. Lenora never found out who, flagged it, and it disappeared. But screenshots don't disappear. Screenshots live forever, forwarded through contact lists and neighborhood group chats. And the particular ecosystem of women who know each other through school pickup and book clubs, and the kind of community that builds quietly around children. By the time the post came down, half of Lenora's social circle had seen it. She knew this because her neighbor Patrice mentioned it sideways over the fence one morning, her voice careful and overly casual in the way that meant she was trying to be kind. She knew because her colleague Bridget sent a text that said, "Just checking in on you," with no further explanation. She knew because her sister phoned from Vancouver and spent 40 minutes not quite saying what she meant to say. Lenora thanked them all and said she was fine. She was not fine. She was also not broken. These are two different things, and she understood the difference. What unsettled her most was not the betrayal itself. She had begun to process that, in the way you process something that requires you to revise your entire understanding of the last several years. What unsettled her was the post. The way Darcy Holcomb had stood in her bedroom. The bedroom Lenora had furnished, in the home she had half paid for, in the life she had built, and posed for a photograph as if she were the one who belonged there. The caption. "Some places just feel like home." There was a particular kind of arrogance in that. Not just in the act itself, but in the announcement of it. In the decision to make it public, to make it visible, to put it out into the world as something to be celebrated. "Look at me. Look where I am. Look what I have." Lenora had never thought of herself as a person who planned revenge. She thought of herself as someone who solved problems. And this, she decided, was a problem with a solution. She found the idea by accident. She had been sitting with her laptop one evening, the girls asleep, Warren in the living room, watching something on television, their marriage by that point, a performance they were both sustaining, for reasons neither of them had acknowledged aloud. She had been looking at Darcy Holcomb's account, still public, still active, a new post every few days, when she saw it. Darcy had partnered with a lifestyle brand. There was a sponsored post, glossy and professionally shot. Darcy in a winter coat standing on a street in what looked like the distillery district in Toronto. In the corner of the image, a small sponsored tag, and underneath the post, in the caption, a link to the brand's website, and a discount code with Darcy's name in it. Lenora looked at that for a long time. Then she opened a new browser tab and started searching. She learned that Instagram allows anyone to purchase ad placements that target specific audiences. She learned that you can target by geography, by interest category, by the accounts people follow. She learned that you can upload custom creative, your own image, your own text. She had worked in communications-adjacent roles, long enough to understand the basics of digital advertising. And what she didn't know, she learned over the following week from YouTube tutorials and a retired media buyer she found through a professional network, to whom she described her project as a small personal awareness campaign. The plan was simple, elegant, even. Darcy had used Instagram to announce herself. Lenora would use Instagram to respond, not with anger, not with names, with 3 words. She hired a graphic designer she found through a contact at work, a woman named Bea who ran a small studio in Westboro and asked no questions beyond what Lenora needed. What Lenora needed was a clean, stark image, white background, black text, 3 words large, with one detail in a different color. He was here. She targeted the ad specifically to women in the 25-45 demographic in Toronto and Ottawa who followed accounts similar to Darcy Holcomb's. Lifestyle accounts. Wellness influencers. The category of Instagram user who would have seen Darcy's original post, who lived in the same digital ecosystem. She set the campaign to run for 72 hours. She paid for it on a Thursday afternoon, sitting at her kitchen table while Maeve did her math homework across from her, and Rosalie argued with a stuffed animal in the next room. She scheduled it to go live on Saturday morning. She didn't sleep well on Friday night. She lay in the dark beside a man who had made her a stranger in her own life, and she thought about what she was doing. She thought about whether it was right. She turned it over the way she turned everything over, methodically, honestly, from multiple angles. She wasn't naming Darcy. She wasn't naming Warren. She wasn't lying. She was placing a statement into the same space Darcy had used to celebrate something that had caused Lenora real harm. That felt, to her, less like revenge and more like accuracy. She wasn't trying to destroy anyone. She was trying to be seen. At some point she fell asleep. When she woke up, the ad was live. She found out it had started working when Maeve, who was allowed 30 minutes on the family iPad on Saturday mornings, looked up from her cereal and said, "Mom, is this yours?" The iPad was face up on the table. On the screen, the ad. He was here, clean white background, black and red text, running in the feed between two other sponsored posts. Lenora took the iPad gently and turned its screen down. "It's something for work," she said. "Eat your breakfast." Maeve looked at her for a moment with those serious eyes. "Okay," she said, and went back to her cereal. Rosalie was still in her room. Warren had not come downstairs yet. Lenora poured herself a coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and watched the notifications begin to collect on her phone. The ad had no name on it, no face, no account handle beyond a placeholder she'd created for the purpose. A generic-seeming profile with a locked account and no followers. There was nothing in it that pointed directly to her, or to Warren, or to Darcy by name. But Darcy's followers saw it, and they had also seen Darcy's original post. And human beings, particularly those who spend a significant amount of time on social media, are very good at connecting dots that are placed in proximity to each other. By noon, people were screenshotting the ad and posting it alongside Darcy's original bedroom photo. The juxtaposition was obvious. The comment section on Darcy's most recent post, a sponsored product review coincidentally, had shifted entirely off topic. Women were asking questions. Women were making connections. Women were saying things in the blunt, precise register that women use when they've decided someone deserves to be named. Darcy had not named anyone. But the internet was doing it for her, working backwards from the tagged hotel, the specific duvet, the Gatineau Hills watercolor that someone had spotted in the background and traced to an Etsy shop that listed a buyer in Ottawa. By mid-afternoon, Darcy Holcomb's follower count had dropped by several thousand. Her comments were being moderated. You could tell because replies were disappearing in real time. One of the brands she partnered with posted a vague statement about their values and removed her from their ambassador page. Lenora watched this from the couch while Rosalie climbed around her like a small, relentless force of nature, demanding to know if they could get a dog. "We'll talk about it," Lenora said. "That means no," Rosalie said. "It means we'll talk about it." Warren came home that evening, from wherever he'd said he was going. She'd stopped tracking the excuses. They had a sameness to them now. And he was quiet in a way that was different from his usual quiet. He moved through the kitchen getting a glass of water, not making eye contact, his jaw doing the thing it did when he was trying to contain something. Lenora was helping Rosalie with a puzzle at the dining room table. She didn't look up. "Did you see what's going around?" he said finally. His voice was careful, controlled. "I've seen a lot of things," she said. A pause. "Lenora, Warren." She fit a puzzle piece into place. It was a picture of a lighthouse. Rosalie immediately took the piece out to examine it and put it back herself. "We can talk about it tomorrow. The girls are up." He stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment. Then he went upstairs. She kept her eyes on the puzzle. The lighthouse was coming together piece by piece, and Rosalie was narrating the process with absolute authority, explaining which colors went where and why the clouds had to go in before the water. Lenora listened. She helped. She was present completely, because her daughters deserved that. They always had, and they always would. Later, after the girls were in bed, she poured 2 glasses of water and sat across from Warren at the kitchen table, and they had the conversation that had been waiting for months. She was calm. She was not cold. She let him speak, and she listened, and she did not perform emotions she wasn't feeling or suppress the ones she was. At one point he said that the ad was an overreaction, that she'd embarrassed people, that she should have come to him first. She looked at him for a moment without speaking. "You were at the Hazelton in October," she said. "You told me you were in Montreal." He didn't answer that. "I didn't come to you," she said, "because you gave up the right to be my first call when you made the choice you made. Whatever I did this weekend, I did in the same space where she announced it. That felt fair to me." He said several more things. She let him finish each one. She did not raise her voice. She had already made her decisions, the important ones, the ones about her future and her daughter's future. And this conversation was not going to change them. It was simply a formality she owed herself, and maybe him. When it was over, she told him she'd spoken to a lawyer. He looked like he'd been expecting it and dreading it simultaneously. She said the girls would be told together, calmly, on a day she would choose, and that she expected him to be present and adult about it. He nodded. She washed the glasses, turned off the kitchen light, and went upstairs. What happened in the weeks that followed was not tidy. It never is. There were conversations with Kathleen, paperwork, logistics, a long Sunday afternoon with both girls on the couch, while Lenora and Warren explained in the clearest and most careful language they could find that sometimes adults change their living arrangements, that this was not because of anything the girls had done, that both of them would always be available to both girls, that this part of life was changing, but the important parts were not. Maeve asked how often she would see her father. Rosalie asked if she could have her own room. They were, both of them, remarkable. Warren moved into an apartment in Centertown. Lenora changed the locks not out of anger, but because the locksmith said it was the standard advice and she had no reason to do otherwise. The Gatineau Hills watercolor stayed on the bedroom wall. She bought new throw pillows. She made the bed differently. She did not contact Darcy Holcomb. There was nothing to say to her. Darcy Holcomb was not the person who had broken her marriage. A marriage requires two people, and one of them was Warren. Darcy had made choices, and so had Warren, and those choices had consequences that were now playing out in their respective lives. That was enough. Lenora didn't need to add to it. What she needed was simpler and harder. To put one foot in front of the other, to be present for Maeve and Rosalie, to rebuild something from the materials that remained. She heard through Patrice over the fence in early December that Darcy Holcomb's consultancy had lost a significant client following the online attention. She heard, from Bridget at work, that people were still talking about the ad. Not as a scandal anymore. The internet moves fast, and scandals have a short half-life. But as a kind of story. A woman who had responded to humiliation not with rage but with precision. A quiet, clear statement placed exactly where the wound had been made. Someone had started calling it the He Was Here campaign in comment threads. She had not expected that. She didn't know exactly how many people had seen the ad. The campaign manager showed a reach of somewhere over 80,000 impressions over the 72 hours it ran. She didn't dwell on that number. It was not, in the end, about reach. It had never been about reach. It had been about a specific feeling. The feeling of being erased from your own life, of having someone else stand in your space and announce themselves. And she had responded to it the only way that had felt honest. She had said, "I was here. I have always been here. And I am not going to be invisible because you decided I should be." By January, she had put Rosalie in swimming lessons at the Carleton University pool on Saturday mornings. A decision Rosalie received with enormous enthusiasm, and Maeve received with mild interest and eventual agreement when she discovered her best friend was in the same session. Warren picked them up on alternating Sundays. Drop-off and pick-up were civil. They had a routine. Lenora started running again, something she hadn't done since before Rosalie was born. Early mornings, along the canal, the ice thick and pale, her breath coming in visible clouds, the city still quiet. She was not running away from anything. She was running because her body needed it, and she had spent too many years treating her own needs as secondary, as things to be attended to eventually, when the more important things were handled. The important things were never handled. There was always another thing. She had learned, slowly, that taking care of herself was not a reward for getting everything else done. It was the condition that made getting everything else done possible. She was at the Byward Market one Saturday in February, Rosalie pulling at her sleeve, in the direction of the maple taffy stand, Maeve walking beside her with the quiet attentiveness she'd always had, when a woman she didn't recognize stopped her. "Are you the one who did the ad?" the woman said. She was around Lenora's age, dark coat, careful eyes. The He Was Here one? Lenora looked at her for a moment. There was nothing hostile in the question. "I am," she said. The woman nodded slowly. "I just wanted to say." She paused. "I've been in a similar situation, and I've never known what to do with it. What you did, the way you did it, it meant something. To a lot of people, I think." Lenora wasn't sure what to say. She didn't want to perform humility she didn't feel, but she also wasn't sure the thing she'd done deserved the weight this woman was giving it. "I was just trying to be accurate," she said finally. The woman smiled. "That's the thing," she said. "Sometimes accurate is enough." Rosalie had located the maple taffy stand through sheer navigational persistence, and was now standing in front of it making eyes at the vendor with practiced skill. Maeve had noticed and was pretending not to watch, which was its own kind of approval. Lenora thanked the woman and moved toward her daughters. The canal was bright with February light. The city was loud and ordinary. Rosalie was already negotiating her taffy, with the confidence of someone who has never once doubted the outcome of a negotiation. And Maeve was reading the signs on the surrounding stalls, with the measured interest of someone cataloging the world for future reference. They were fine. They were more than fine. Lenora breathed in the cold air and walked toward them, and it tasted, she thought, exactly like starting over.